They call it the January thaw, that brief, deceptive window in the heart of winter when the mercury rises just enough to melt the top layer of snow, only for it to freeze again overnight into a sheet of black ice. But up at the Blackwood hydroelectric station, there is no thaw. There is only the static, the concrete, and the cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, but burrows into your marrow. My name is Elias Thorne. I'm writing this from a motel room in Portland, 300 miles south of the station. I haven't slept in 4 days. If I close my eyes, I hear the turbines screaming. If I close my eyes, I see the face that looked like mine, but wasn't. This is a true story. You can check the police reports from Tillamook County dated January 14th through the 18th. They'll tell you it was carbon monoxide poisoning or acute cabin fever. They'll talk about isolation psychosis, but they won't explain the recordings. They won't explain why the steel blast doors were bent from the outside. I took the caretaker position because I was desperate. It was a 6-week contract covering for a guy named Miller who had supposedly taken ill. The job was simple. Monitor the gauges, keep the intake valves clear of ice, and radio in a status report to the central grid twice a day. The pay was exorbitant, likely because nobody wanted to spend the dead of winter suspended over a freezing gorge in a concrete tomb built in the 1950s. The drive up was the first warning. The access road winds through the coastal range, a serpentine path of cracked asphalt flanked by towering Douglas firs that blot out the sky. By the time I reached the gate, the snow was already falling. Heavy, wet flakes that stuck to the windshield like wet cotton. The station itself was a brutalist monolith, a gray slab of industrial hostility wedged between two cliff faces, holding back millions of gallons of black, freezing water. Inside, the station smelled of ozone, stale coffee, and damp concrete. It was loud. That's the first thing you realize about hydroelectric dams. They are never silent. The turbines, located deep in the bowels of the structure, generate a constant low-frequency thrum that vibrates the floorboards and rattles your teeth. You feel it more than you hear it. It becomes your heartbeat. The first 3 days were mundane. I settled into the control room, a glass-walled perch overlooking the generator floor. I read paperback thrillers, drank too much instant coffee, and watched the snow pile up against the reinforced windows. The isolation was absolute. The radio was my only link to the world, a crackling box that spat out the bored voice of the dispatcher, Sarah, at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. On the 4th day, January 7th, the storm hit. They called it a historic blizzard, a bomb cyclone. The sky turned a bruised purple, then a total void-like black. The wind didn't howl, it shrieked, a high-pitched mechanical grinding that sounded like metal on bone. The temperature plummeted to 5 degrees. That night, I was doing my rounds on the lower catwalks, checking the pressure valves on turbine 3. The lighting down there is sodium vapor yellow, casting long, sickly shadows that seem to stretch and detach from the machinery. I was walking the grate, the roar of the water deafening below me, when I saw it, a wet footprint. It was on the metal grating, rapidly freezing into ice. It was bare, a naked human foot, large, with elongated toes, stamped in water that hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. I stared at it, my flashlight beam trembling. I was alone. The facility was locked down. The blast doors required a key card and a retinal scan. There was no way in. "Hello?" I yelled, my voice swallowed instantly by the turbine's drone. I backed away, scanning the shadows between the massive generator housings. Nothing, just the endless, rhythmic thumping of the machinery. I convinced myself it was a leak, a drip from the condensation pipes above that just happened to look like a foot. I retreated to the control room and locked the door. Day 6. The storm had buried the lower access roads. I was effectively trapped, which was fine. That was the job. But the radio started acting up. Sarah's voice usually came through with a bit of static, but today, the static was organized. "Station 4, check in," Sarah's voice came. "Station 4 here, all green. Weather is hell, but power output is stable," I replied. There was a pause. Then, through the speaker, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a recording of my own voice, played back to me, but distorted, deepened. "Power output is stable, stable, stable." "Sarah, you getting feedback?" I asked. "Station 4, I didn't copy. You broke up. Repeat." I heard a playback. "Are you recording me?"
Negative, Elias. No playback on this end, just wind. You sound tired. I was tired, but I wasn't crazy. I spent the rest of the day reviewing the CCTV feeds. The cameras monitored the perimeter, the intake, and the generator floor. The feeds were grainy, black and white, ghosting with interference from the storm. At 2 a.m., I saw him. Camera 4, pointing at the external intake grate. It's a restricted area, a narrow walkway suspended over the reservoir itself. The water there is turbulent, sucking down into the penstocks with enough force to crush a car. Standing at the railing, facing the camera, was a figure. It was naked. Its skin was pale white, almost luminous against the dark water. It had no hair. It stood perfectly still in the gale force winds, unbothered by the sub-zero temperatures. It was looking directly into the lens. I scrambled for the microphone to the PA system. "Hey, get away from the intake!"
The figure didn't flinch. It just elongated. That's the only way I can describe it. Its torso stretched, its jaw unhinged, dropping to its chest, and then the camera feed cut to static. I grabbed the emergency flare gun and a heavy wrench. I had to go out there. If someone was suicidal or if this was some elaborate prank, I was liable. I put on my thermal gear, the cold air hitting me like a physical blow as I opened the service hatch. The wind on the walkway was violent enough to knock me over. I clipped my safety line to the rail and inched toward the intake. The spot where the figure had stood was empty, but on the railing, frozen into the metal, was a handprint. It was massive, 6 fingers, the palm distinctively swirled, not like a human fingerprint, but like the grain of wood or the turbulence of water. I looked over the edge into the churning black abyss of the intake, nothing but freezing spray. I went back inside, shaking, my core temperature dropping. I warmed up in the break room, wrapping my hands around a mug of coffee. That's when I heard the knocking. It wasn't at the door. It was coming from inside the ventilation ducts. Clang, clang, clang. Rhythmic, deliberate, moving from the generator floor up toward the control room. I barricaded the door. I pulled the heavy filing cabinet in front of it. I sat there with the flare gun pointed at the vent, watching the screws vibrate. The knocking stopped right above my head. For hours, silence. Then, a voice. Not from the radio, from the vent. Elias. It was my voice. It wasn't an impression. It was my vocal cords, my inflection, my cadence. Elias, it's cold out here. Let me in. The shift is over. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I sat there weeping silently, the horror of hearing myself speak from the darkness paralyzing me. Day 8. The blizzard was a whiteout. Visibility 0. I hadn't slept. I was running on adrenaline and terror. I tried the radio again. "Mayday, this is Station 4. I have an intruder. I repeat, intruder on site." Static. Then Sarah's voice. "Station 4. This is dispatch. We copy. Elias, are you okay? You sound wrong. Send police. Send a chopper. I don't care about the weather." Elias. Sarah's voice changed. It shifted, dropping an octave, becoming guttural. "There is no police, Elias. The road is gone. We are all just snow now." I smashed the radio with the wrench. Sparks showered the desk. I needed to find Miller's logs, the previous caretaker. I tore apart the office, ripping out drawers. I found a notebook taped under the bottom drawer of the desk. The handwriting was erratic, jagged. Jan 4. It listens to the turbines. It likes the frequency. Jan 8. It wears the cold like a coat. Jan 12. I saw my face in the window, but I wasn't looking at the window. Jan 14. If it gets in, don't look at its eyes. It doesn't have any. It just has holes where the light goes to die. Miller hadn't gotten sick. Miller had disappeared. The lights died on day 9. The main generator tripped. The emergency reds kicked in, bathing the station in a bloody, pulsating glow. The silence was the worst part. The turbines had stopped. The heartbeat was gone. I had to go down there. I had to restart the turbine manually or the pressure would build up and blow the intake seals. If that happened, the station would flood and I'd drown in the dark. I took the flare gun and a flashlight. The descent into the generator hall felt like walking into the throat of a beast. The silence was heavy, pressurized. The emergency red lights rotated, creating moving shadows that danced across the massive cylindrical housings of the turbines. I reached the manual override panel for turbine 3. My breath misted in the freezing air. It was colder inside now than outside.
Hoarfrost was growing on the metal railings, but not naturally. It was growing in patterns, fractals that looked like faces, screaming mouths frozen in ice. I gripped the lever. "Help me!" The whisper was right behind my ear. I spun around, firing the flare gun blindly. The magnesium flare exploded in the vast hall, a blinding star of white phosphorus. It skittered across the floor, illuminating the corner of the room. Crouched on top of Turbine 2 was me. But it wasn't me. It was a thing wearing my shape like a suit that was too tight. The limbs were too long, bent at extra joints. The skin was translucent, showing dark, sluggish veins underneath that pulsed with black ichor. And the face was sliding off. The eyes were wide, unblinking, and entirely white. The mouth was a perfect circle of needle-like teeth, smiling. "Elias," the thing said, its voice a perfect mimicry of my own terrified screams. "It's time to change shift." It leaped. It didn't jump like a man. It sprang like a spider, covering 30 feet of air in a second. I dove to the side, rolling across the grating. The thing slammed into the control panel, shattering the gauges. I scrambled toward the stairwell, my boots slipping on the ice. I could hear it scuttling behind me, the clack, clack, clack of its elongated nails on the metal. I made it to the heavy blast door of the stairwell and slammed it shut, spinning the locking wheel just as a massive force collided on the other side. The metal groaned. A dent appeared in the center of the steel, pushing inward. I ran up the stairs, lungs burning, legs screaming. I didn't stop at the control room. I went higher, to the roof access. The storm was raging, a vortex of white violence. The wind nearly blew me off the roof. I scrambled toward the company truck parked near the upper loading dock, realizing too late I had left the keys in the office. I looked back at the roof access door. The handle was turning. I had no choice. I ran toward the tree line. The snow was waist deep. Every step was a battle. I fell, crawled, wept, and got up again. I didn't look back. I could hear it screaming over the wind, a sound that was half human, half grinding metal. I walked for 6 hours in the blizzard. I don't remember much of it. I remember the cold stopping being painful and becoming warm, inviting. That's the end stage of hypothermia. I remember seeing lights. A snowplow found me on the main county road. The driver said I was incoherent, babbling about the static man and the teeth in the turbine. They took me to the hospital in Tillamook. I lost 3 toes to frostbite. They told me Miller, the previous caretaker, had been found in the reservoir 3 weeks ago, tangled in the intake grate. But here's the thing. Here is why I'm writing this in a motel room with the door chained. When they discharged me, they gave me my personal effects found at the station. My wallet, my keys, my phone. I unlocked my phone to check my messages. There was a video recorded 2 days ago while I was in the hospital. The video is dark, shaky. It's filmed inside the station. The camera pans over the control room, showing the smashed radio, the barricaded door. Then it turns. The camera faces a mirror. Standing there is me. I'm smiling. My eyes are white. Shift change, the reflection said. I left the phone in the trash can. I bought a gun. I'm driving south as far as the road goes, but I know it's not far enough because every time I turn on the TV, every time I tune the radio between stations, I hear it. I hear the static, and in the static, I hear my own voice whispering my name.
I've never liked January. People call it a fresh start, a clean slate. But if you live far enough north, where the pines grow so thick they choke out the sun, and the roads turn into winding ribbons of black ice, you know the truth. January isn't a beginning, it's a dead month. It's a vacuum where nature holds its breath, waiting for the weak to freeze. I'm writing this because they say writing is a way to purge trauma. My therapist calls it exposure therapy via narrative reconstruction. I call it a warning. If you're reading this and you see the snow falling straight down without a breath of wind, lock your doors. Don't look out the window. And for God's sakes, don't answer the knocking, no matter how much it sounds like someone you love. It started on January 3rd. I had inherited my grandfather's cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He had died of a heart attack, or so the coroner said, just 2 days after Christmas. He was a recluse, A man who had spent the last 30 years of his life fortifying a home against a war that never came. I was the only next of kin, a broke freelance graphic designer living in Chicago, and the idea of a free house, even one buried in the boonies, sounded like a lifeline. I planned to go up, assess the property, maybe fix it up to sell in the spring, and spend a few weeks disconnecting from the city grid. I drove my beat-up 4Runner north. The deeper I got into the UP, the more the world seemed to lose its color. The vibrant grays of the highway gave way to the oppressive, blinding white of the deep snow. By the time I turned on to the unpaved logging road that led to the property, the sun was already setting, a bruised purple welt on the horizon. The trees here were ancient, towering hemlocks and spruces bowed heavy under snow loads that looked like shrouds. The cabin was more of a fortress. It was a 2-story structure made of dark treated timber, sitting on a foundation of riverstone. It looked angry. That's the only way I can describe it. It looked like it resented my presence immediately. I parked the truck, the tires crunching loudly in the absolute silence of the woods. That's the first thing you notice about the deep winter, the silence. It's not peaceful, it's heavy. It presses against your eardrums. Getting inside was a chore. The lock was frozen, then I had to use a lighter to warm the key. When the door finally groaned open, the smell hit me. Stale air, sawdust, and something else. Something metallic like ozone or old copper. The interior was frozen in time. My grandfather's coffee mug was still on the side table, a dark ring of mold at the bottom. The fireplace was cold and black, a gaping maw in the living room. The first night was uneventful. Physically, psychologically, it was a gauntlet. The house made sounds I'd never heard a building make. The wood contracted in the dropping temperatures, sounding like gunshots echoing through the halls. I slept in the living room, wrapped in 3 sleeping bags, feeding the wood stove until the iron glowed cherry red. I dreamt of white static, just endless, shifting white noise that whispered my name. Day 3 brought the storm. The radio warned of a historic lake effect event, predicting 4 feet of snow in 24 hours. I went out to the shed to check the generator. That's when I saw the first set of tracks. They were at the edge of the clearing, right where the forest line began. They weren't animal tracks. They were elongated, resembling bare human feet but stretched, the toes too long, the heel too narrow, and they didn't lead anywhere. They just appeared in the snow, circled a large oak tree twice, and vanished. I convinced myself it was a prank, maybe some local kids messing with the city boy. I retreated inside, locked the heavy deadbolt, and poured a drink. I spent the afternoon going through Granddad's study. It was a chaotic mess of maps, geological surveys, and journals, hundreds of journals. I picked one from the stack dated 1998. The handwriting was frantic. The cold is not a temperature. It is a consciousness. It wakes when the sun is furthest away. The January men are hungry this year. I laughed it off, just the ramblings of an old lonely man going senile in the woods. But as the sun went down and the wind began to howl, picking up the loose snow and hurling it against the siding like handfuls of gravel, the laughter died in my throat. At 9 p.m., the power died. The generator didn't kick on. The silence returned, but now it was underneath the screaming wind. I grabbed a flashlight and my coat, cursing under my breath. I had to go to the shed. I opened the front door and was immediately assaulted by the cold. It wasn't freezing, it felt malicious. It bit through my thermal layers instantly. The beam of my flashlight cut a cone through the driving snow. I trudged to the shed, the snow already up to my knees. The shed door was hanging open. I froze. I had latched it. I knew I had. I shone the light inside. The generator was destroyed. Not broken, destroyed. Deep claw marks like gouges from a chisel had shredded the metal casing. Wires were ripped out, sparking faintly. Then I heard it, a sound coming from the woods over the roar of the wind. It sounded like chattering teeth, enormous wet teeth clacking together. I ran back to the house, slipping on the ice, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slammed the door, threw the deadbolt, and backed away. The
temperature in the cabin was dropping fast. I threw more logs into the fire, building it up until the flames licked the chimney throat. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the armchair, a fire poker in my hand, watching the windows. The frost patterns on the glass were strange. Usually frost creates fractals, ferns, geometric shapes, but these, they looked like faces, screaming faces pressing in from the outside. Day 4. The snow was halfway up the first-story windows. I was trapped. No cell service, the landline was dead. I was effectively erased from the world. I went back to the journals, looking for answers, for anything. They can mimic, the 2005 journal read. They take the voices of those you lost. Do not listen. They want the heat. They eat the warmth right out of your marrow. Around noon, I heard the knocking. It was polite, rhythmic. 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. It came from the back door, the door that opened out to a drop-off into the ravine. There was no balcony there, just a 20-foot drop. Elias?
The voice was soft. It was my mother's voice. My mother, who had died in a car crash when I was 12. Elias, honey, let me in. It's so cold out here. Please, Elias. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. It was perfect. The inflection, the slight crack in the timber. It was her. I took a step toward the kitchen, my hand reaching for the latch. Then I remembered the drop. I remembered the journals. Go away! I screamed, my voice cracking. The knocking stopped. A long silence followed. Then a sound that will haunt me until I die. A low, guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards, shifting into a high-pitched, mocking laughter that sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Cold, the voice hissed, no longer my mother's. So cold. That night, the siege began. They didn't just knock, they slammed against the walls. The house shuddered under the blows. I boarded up the windows with spare lumber from the basement, working by the light of a kerosene lamp. The shadows danced, stretching and contorting. I saw things in the corners of my vision, tall, pale figures that vanished when I turned my head. They were getting in, not physically, but psychically. The cold was seeping into my mind. I retreated to the center of the living room. I made a circle of salt, an old superstition I'd read in one of the books. It felt ridiculous, but I was desperate. I sat inside it, shivering violently. The thermometer on the wall read 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the house, I must have dozed off or passed out from hypothermia. I woke up to a sound of dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The fire was out. The room was pitch black. I fumbled for the lighter, my fingers numb and clumsy. The flame flared to life, illuminating a small sphere of terror. Standing on the other side of the coffee table was a figure. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and incredibly thin. Its skin was the color of old milk, translucent enough to see black veins pulsing beneath. It was naked, but it had no genitalia, just smooth white flesh. Its arms hung down to... The voice was soft. It was my mother's voice. My mother, who had died in a car crash when I was 12. Elias, honey, let me in. It's so cold out here. Please, Elias. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. It was perfect. The inflection, the slight crack in the timber. It was her. I took a step toward the kitchen, my hand reaching for the latch. Then I remembered the drop. I remembered the journals. Go away! I screamed, my voice cracking. The knocking stopped. A long silence followed. Then a sound that will haunt me until I die. A low, guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards, shifting into a high-pitched, mocking laughter that sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Cold, the voice hissed, no longer my mother's. So cold. That night, the siege began. They didn't just knock, they slammed against the walls. The house shuddered under the blows. I boarded up the windows with spare lumber from the basement, working by the light of a kerosene lamp. The shadows danced, stretching and contorting. I saw things in the corners of my vision, tall, pale figures that vanished when I turned my head. They were getting in, not physically, but psychically. The cold was seeping into my mind. I retreated to the center of the living room. I made a circle of salt, an old superstition I'd read in one of the books. It felt ridiculous, but I was desperate. I sat inside it, shivering violently. The thermometer on the wall read 20 degrees Fahrenheit. inside the house. I must have dozed off or passed out from hypothermia. I woke up to a sound of dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The fire was out. The room was pitch black. I fumbled for the lighter, my fingers numb and clumsy. The flame flared to life, illuminating a small sphere of terror. Standing on the other side of the coffee table was a figure. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and incredibly thin. Its skin was the color of old milk, translucent enough to see black veins pulsing beneath. It was naked, but it had no genitalia, just smooth white flesh. Its arms hung down to its knees, ending in fingers that were more like icicles. But the face, dear God, the face. It had no eyes, just indentations where sockets should be, and its mouth was a vertical slit, sewn shut with frost. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, radiating a cold so intense it burned my skin from 5 feet away. The dripping sound was coming from its fingertips, black sludge, thawing and hitting the floorboards. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with glass. The creature tilted its head, the neck cracking like a breaking branch. Then, the vertical mouth ripped open. No lips, just a tearing of skin. Warmth, it rasped. I scrambled back, knocking over the lamp. The glass shattered and the kerosene ignited. A pool of fire spread across the rug. The creature didn't flinch. It stepped into the fire. It didn't burn. The flames turned blue, then gray, then died as they touched its skin. It was extinguishing the fire with its very presence. I ran. I abandoned the sanctity of the living room and bolted for the stairs. I needed higher ground. I needed a weapon. I ran into the master bedroom and slammed the door, shoving a heavy dresser against it. I could hear the wet slap of its feet coming up the stairs. Slap, slap, slap. I backed against the window. The storm outside had cleared, leaving a bright full moon reflecting off the endless snow. The world was lit in spectral blue. I looked down. The drop was 15 feet into a snowdrift. The door handle turned. The wood of the door began to frost over, white crystals spreading rapidly from the center. The dresser groaned as something pushed against it with impossible strength. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table and smashed the window. The sound was deafening in the quiet night. Cold air rushed in like a physical blow. The bedroom door shattered, not burst open, shattered, like it was made of glass. 3 of them were there, the January men. They filled the doorway, a wall of pale, freezing flesh. Behind them, the hallway was coated in thick ice. I didn't hesitate. I jumped. I hit the snowdrift hard. The powder was deep, cushioning the fall, but the cold was instantaneous. I scrambled up, gasping, flailing through the waist-deep snow. I ran toward the truck, knowing it was futile, knowing the keys were inside, knowing it wouldn't start. I looked back. They weren't chasing me. They were standing at the broken window, watching, and then I saw them in the yard. Dozens of them, emerging from the trees, rising from the snowdrifts, a legion of frozen souls. I ran for the road. My lungs burned. My fingers were dead. I felt the hypothermia setting in, the warm, fuzzy feeling that precedes death, the desire to just lie down and sleep. Just sleep, Elias. It's so soft. The snow is a blanket. I fell. I face-planted into the snow. I couldn't get up. My legs wouldn't listen. I rolled onto my back, looking up at the stars. They looked like chips of ice. A shadow fell over me. One of them was standing right above me. It leaned down, its eyeless face inches from mine. I could feel the vacuum of it, sucking the heat from my face. It reached out a long white finger and touched my forehead. I screamed, but no sound came out. The pain was absolute. It felt like a railroad spike being driven into my skull. And then, lights. Blinding yellow lights sweeping across the snow. The roar of a diesel engine. A snowplow. The massive county plow coming down the logging road, clearing the way for emergency crews who had finally tracked the outages. The creature hissed, a sound like steam escaping, and dissolved. It didn't run away. It just turned into a mist of ice crystals and blew away on the wind. The plow driver found me half dead. He said I was babbling about the white hunger and the vertical mouths. I lost 3 toes on my left foot and the tip of my right ear to frostbite. The doctors said I was lucky. They said I hallucinated from the isolation and the cold.
Paradoxical undressing, they called it. The mind playing tricks. But I know what I saw. I sold the property 2 weeks later to a developer downstate. I didn't tell him about the journals. I didn't tell him about the claw marks on the generator. I just signed the papers and got on a plane to Arizona. I live in Phoenix now. I don't go anywhere where the temperature drops below 50 degrees. But sometimes, in the middle of July, when the AC is humming and the room gets a little too chilly, I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And I know they're waiting. They're waiting for the world to turn, for the sun to retreat. They are waiting for January. Because the cold isn't a temperature, it's a hunger. And it knows where I am.
I don't live in that house anymore. I don't even live in that state. I moved as far inland as I could, to a place where the earth is dry and cracked, where nothing grows unless you force it to with irrigation lines and sheer will. I can't stand humidity. I can't stand the smell of wet drywall or the sound of pipes settling in the night, but mostly, I can't stand neighbors. I live on 40 acres of scrubland now. If I see another human being, they are a mile away, a silhouette against the sun. That is the only way I can sleep. It started 3 years ago. I was living in a subdivision called Harrow's Creek, one of those places carved out of a damp woodland in the Pacific Northwest. It was nice enough. The houses were distinct. Victorians, colonials, craftsmen, all situated on half-acre lots that gave you the illusion of privacy. I lived at 40 Blackwood Lane. The house next to me, number 42, had been empty for the better part of a decade. It was a looming Victorian monstrosity painted a peeling shade of slate gray, its windows like cataracts, clouded with years of grime. Then, the sold sign appeared. No tours, no open houses, just a sign one day and a moving truck the next. I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee and trying to ignore the looming deadline of an architectural draft I was working on when the truck arrived. It wasn't a professional moving van. It was a rusted, unmarked box truck that shuddered and wheezed as it backed into the driveway of number 42. The driver didn't get out. Instead, the passenger door opened, and a man stepped onto the cracked pavement. That was my first look at Silas Vane. He was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a suit that looked like it had been tailored for a man with twice his bulk in the 1920s. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow, but I could see his chin, sharp, pointed, and gray. He didn't look at the house. He looked at the trees surrounding it. He stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then, without acknowledging me or the driver, he walked to the front door, unlocked it with a key that looked too large for the lock, and vanished inside. The driver began unloading. There was no furniture, no bed frames, no sofas, no tables, just boxes, hundreds of them. They were heavy, soggy cardboard boxes that sagged at the bottom. The driver wore thick rubber gloves. I watched as he hauled them in one by one. At one point, a box slipped from his grip and hit the driveway. It didn't crash or shatter. It made a wet, heavy thud, like a side of beef hitting a butcher's block. A dark fluid seeped from the corner of the cardboard. The driver swore, scooped it up, and hurried inside. I should have walked over. I should have done the neighborly thing, brought a casserole, introduced myself, but a primal alarm bell was ringing in my lizard brain. Predator, it whispered. Sickness. Rot. The first month was defined by the noise. You expect noise when a neighbor moves in. Hammers, drills, music. But Vane didn't seem to be building anything. The sounds coming from number 42 were wet. At night, when the streetlights hummed and the rest of the neighborhood slept, I could hear it through my bedroom wall, which faced his house. It sounded like someone stirring a giant vat of thick soup, a rhythmic, squelching churning. Occasionally, there was a sound like canvas tearing, high and sharp. I met him properly 3 weeks in. I was taking my trash bins to the curb. It was dusk, the sky a bruised purple. I turned around, and he was standing right behind me. I yelped, dropping the lid of the bin. "Apologies," he said. His voice was like dry leaves skittering on pavement, raspy, multitonal. "I didn't hear you walk up," I stammered, heart hammering. "I walk softly," Vane said. He was closer now. The smell coming off him was overpowering. It wasn't body odor.
It was the smell of a florist's shop that had lost power for a week. Sickly sweet decomposition, ammonia, and wet earth. Up close, his skin was terrifying. It looked translucent, like wax paper stretched over bone. I could see dark veins pulsing beneath his cheeks, but they didn't look like blood vessels. They looked like roots. "Here, I am Silas," he said. He didn't offer a hand. "Arthur, I live right there." I pointed to my house, feeling stupid. "I know," he said. He tilted his head. His eyes were completely black. No iris, no sclera, just polished obsidian orbs. I told myself it was a trick of the low light. "Your house, it breathes well." "It's, good insulation," I said. "Insulation," Vane repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, the membrane must be kept intact until it is time to shed." He smiled then. His teeth were yellow and too numerous. I stepped back. "Good to meet you, Silas. I have to go inside. Dinner on the stove." "Eat well, Arthur," he whispered. "Growth requires fuel." I ran inside and locked the door. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the windows. That night, the churning sound was louder, and for the first time, I heard something else. I heard scratching, not from his house, but from inside my own walls. By the second month, the vegetation changed. Harrow's Creek was known for its pine trees and rhododendrons, but the yard of number 42 was spawning something else. Great weeping vines with thorns the size of fingers exploded from the soil. They climbed the siding of Vane's house, sealing the window shut. They were a pale, fleshy pink color. They didn't look like plants. They looked like intestines. They grew fast, visibly fast. I would wake up in the morning and find them had advanced another foot, reaching across the fence line towards my property. I called the homeowners association. A woman named Brenda came out. She was a stickler for rules, the kind of woman who measured grass height with a ruler. I watched from my window as she marched up to Vane's door, clipboard in hand. She knocked. The door opened a crack. I saw a pale hand emerge. Brenda stiffened. She seemed to be arguing. Then the hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. I gasped, hand on my phone to dial 911, but just as quickly, he let go. Brenda stumbled back, looking dazed. She dropped her clipboard. She turned and walked to her car, her movements stiff and jerky. She drove away without picking up the clipboard. When I called her later, she sounded hollow. "It is natural," she said. "It is the new way. Goodbye, Arthur." I started buying bleach, gallons of it. I poured it along the fence line. Where the chemical hit the pink vines, they hissed and retracted, bleeding a thick black ichor. The turning point came in November. The rains had started and never stopped. The world was gray and soaking. I was in my basement, checking the sump pump, when I noticed the patch on the wall. My basement wall, the one shared with the direction of Vane's house, was concrete block. But in the center, about 4 feet up, the concrete was soft. It was spongy. A yellow mold, vibrant and pulsating, was spreading in a perfect circle. I put a mask on and scraped it off with a putty knife. Under the mold, the concrete was crumbling. I poked it with a screwdriver and the metal sank in 2 inches deep. The concrete wasn't concrete anymore. It had been transmuted. It felt like cartilage. I backed away, gagging. I ran upstairs and called the police. I told them I heard screaming from next door. It was a lie, but I needed them to enter that house. 2 officers arrived an hour later. I met them in the driveway. "He's got something in there," I told them. Rain plastering my hair to the skull. The smell, the fluids, something is rotting. Officer Miller, a burly man who looked like he'd seen it all, nodded. "We'll do a welfare check." They knocked on the door of number 42. No answer. The house loomed dark and silent, covered in the probing pink vines. Miller tried the knob. Locked. He pounded on the wood. "Mr. Vane, police department." Nothing. Miller looked at his partner, then put his shoulder to the door. It didn't budge. It sounded like he was hitting a side of leather. He tried again, harder.
The door didn't break open. It squelched open. The frame seemed to stretch and tear as the door swung inward, trailing strings of sticky mucus. The officers drew their guns and went in. I stood in the driveway, waiting. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 2. Then a sound. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a wet, sucking sound, followed by a muffled cry of surprise. Then silence again. "Officer?" I called out. Officer Miller walked out. He wasn't wearing his hat. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated to the rim. He holstered his gun. "Everything is fine," Miller said. His voice was flat. "Where is your partner?" "Checking the rear," Miller said. He walked past me, toward his cruiser. He walked with a strange, loping gait, his knees bending slightly backward. "What did you see?" I demanded, grabbing his arm. His skin was freezing, hard and cold. He looked at me, and for a second I saw something moving behind his pupil, like a worm swimming in the vitreous fluid. "Renovations," Miller said. "He is just renovating. Go inside, Arthur. It's not safe out here. The spores are heavy tonight." He got in the car and drove away. He left his partner inside. That was when I knew I was alone. I went inside and boarded up my windows. I took the architectural plans I was working on and burned them in the fireplace just to have light and heat, because the power had started to flicker. The house was cold, but the walls were warm. I put my hand against the living room plaster. It was fever hot. I could feel a pulse. My house was being infected. The organism next door wasn't just growing on the land. It was changing the molecular structure of everything around it. It was digesting the neighborhood. I grabbed my keys, my laptop, and a crowbar. I was leaving. Now. I opened the front door, and I froze. The pink vines had crossed the driveway. They had woven together into a thick, fleshy barricade, sealing off the exit. My car was consumed, a lump of metal under a layer of pulsating membrane. I turned to the backyard. The fence was gone, replaced by a wall of writhing thorns. I was trapped. The only way out was through the source. I don't know where the logic came from. Hysteria, perhaps. If I could kill the heart, maybe the limbs would die. I ran to the basement. The cartilage patch on the wall had grown. It was now a gaping orifice, oozing yellow bile. I took the crowbar and swung it. I didn't chip rock. I tore flesh. The wall screamed, a high-pitched tea kettle shriek that vibrated in my teeth. I swung again and again, hacking through the soft, meat-like barrier that used to be a foundation. I broke through into Silas Vane's basement. The air that hit me was hot, humid, and smelled of copper and old lilies. I crawled through the hole, gagging. Silas Vane's basement was not a basement. It was a stomach. The floor was covered in a foot of digestive acid, islands of bone, femurs, ribs, skulls poked out of the slurry. The walls were lined with egg sacs, thousands of them, translucent and glowing with a soft bioluminescent green light. Inside each sac, a curled form twitched. They looked like fetuses, but their limbs were too long, their fingers tipped with chitinous claws. And in the center, suspended by thick arteries that ran into the ceiling, was Officer Miller. He was still alive. His skin had fused with the organic matter of the room. Vines entered his mouth and ears, pumping fluids into him. His eyes met mine. They were filled with absolute, shattering terror. He tried to speak, but only bubbles of green slime escaped his lips. Then I heard the clicking. I looked up. Silas Vane was clinging to the ceiling. But it wasn't the Silas I knew. The suit was gone. His skin had split open like a husk. What emerged was a monstrosity of geometry and biology. He was a centipede human hybrid, his torso elongated into a segmented carapace, dozens of human arms serving as legs, each hand tipped with a surgical scalpel of bone. His face was still there, stretched over a mandible that dripped enzymes. "Arthur," the thing hissed. The voice came from everywhere. "You are early. The gestation is not complete." "What are you?" I screamed, gripping the crowbar. "A builder," Vane chittered. He skittered down the wall, defying gravity, his many hands clutching the fleshy folds of the room. "Your house was dead, Arthur. Wood and stone, dead matter. I am giving it a soul." He lunged. I swung the crowbar blindly. It connected with one of his human arm legs, shattering the bone. Vane shrieked, a sound that popped one of my eardrums. He recoiled, his mandibles snapping inches from my face. I scrambled backward, slipping in the digestive slime.
My hand landed on something hard. A gas can, one of the items the movers had brought in. It was old red metal. "You resist the Union," Vane hissed, gathering himself for another strike. "Look at the piece." He gestured to the police officer, whose eyes were rolling back as he was absorbed further into the hive. "Burn," I wheezed. I uncapped the gas can. It was full. I didn't hesitate. I splashed the contents all over the egg sacs, over the police officer, over the rushing form of Vane. Vane froze. The smell of gasoline cut through the rot. For the first time, the obsidian eyes showed fear. "No," he clicked. "The architecture is delicate." I fished my lighter from my pocket. "Renovate this," I said. I flicked the wheel. The spark caught the fumes instantly. The blast threw me backward through the hole in the basement, back into my own basement. The scream that came from number 42 was not of this world. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting, of 1,000 voices crying out in unison. I crawled up my basement stairs as the heat rose. My house was reacting. The walls convulsed, the floorboards buckled. The organism was dying, and as it died, it thrashed. I made it to the kitchen just as the windows blew out. I threw myself through the shattered back door, cutting my arms on the glass, tumbling into the backyard. The fleshy vines that had blocked the exit were withering, screaming as they curled into ash. I scrambled over the smoking remains of the fence, running until my lungs burned, running until I hit the street. I turned back. Number 42 was a torch, but the fire wasn't orange. It was a kaleidoscope of burning chemicals, greens, purples, and blues. The structure of the house was melting, not collapsing. The roof sagged like wet clay, and inside the flames I saw a silhouette, tall, many-armed, thrashing against the dying membrane of its hive. The fire department came. They treated me for smoke inhalation and shock. They said it was a gas leak. They said the old man who lived there must have been a hoarder, that the chemicals accelerated the blaze. They didn't find any bodies. Not Vane, not the officer. They said the heat was so intense it vaporized everything. I moved away the next day. I left everything I owned. But sometimes, late at night, in my cabin in the desert, I wake up scratching. I look at my skin in the mirror, and just below the surface of my left arm, right where I cut it on the glass while escaping, there is a faint, pink line. It's not a scar, it's a vine. It moves when I sleep. It whispers to me. It tells me that the renovations aren't finished. It tells me that I am the new foundation. I pick up the knife. I have to get it out. I have to get it out before I start to build.
The separation between my life and his was exactly 4.5 inches. That is the standard thickness of a residential wall. 2 layers of drywall, a few wooden studs, and a pocket of stale air. We like to think of walls as barriers, as shields that grant us privacy, but in the grand scheme of things, they are nothing more than acoustic membranes. If you listen hard enough, you can hear a life unfolding on the other side. And if they listen hard enough, they can hear you breathing. I moved into the Kensington Arms in late October. It was one of those pre-war buildings that had been renovated firmly into the good enough category. The lobby had marble floors that were permanently sticky, and the elevator groaned like a dying animal every time it passed the 3rd floor. I took Unit 4A. It was a corner unit, decent light, hardwood floors that had been refinished so many times they were paper thin. It was a steal for the city, and I was desperate. My breakup with Sarah had left me with half a savings account and a need to be anywhere but our old shared cottage. The landlord, a man named Mr. Henderson, who seemed to be composed entirely of cigarette ash and sweat, handed me the keys with a grunt. "Quiet building," he wheezed. "Mostly older folks. Don't make trouble, you won't get trouble. Rent is due on the 1st. Cash or check. No Venmo nonsense." "Who's in 4B?" I asked, glancing at the peeling black door adjacent to mine. The proximity bothered me instantly. The door frames were barely 6 inches apart. Henderson shrugged. "Mr. Calloway. Quiet guy. Been here since the 70s. You won't hear a peep out of him." That was the first lie. The first week was uneventful.
It was the honeymoon phase of independent living. I arranged my furniture, bought a few plants I'd inevitably kill, and tried to establish a routine. I work remotely as a data analyst, so the apartment was my world. 4A was my fortress. But the silence of the building was oppressive. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind you feel in your ears when you dive too deep underwater. I met Calloway on the 4th day. I was struggling with 2 bags of groceries and a case of sparkling water, trying to shimmy my key into the lock. His door opened. It didn't swing open. It cracked, just an inch, the chain lock still engaged. Through the sliver of darkness, I saw an eye. It was milky, surrounded by skin that looked like crumpled parchment paper. "Hello?" I said, shifting the weight of the water. "I'm Mark, just moved in next door." The eye didn't blink. A smell drifted out from the crack. It hit me before I could process it. Sweet, cloying, like rotting fruit mixed with bleach. "You walk heavy, Mark," the voice rasped. It sounded wet. "You walk heavy on the heels." Thump, thump, thump. "Oh, sorry. I'll take my boots off inside." Thump, thump, the voice repeated, devoid of inflection. The door clicked shut. I heard 3 distinct locks engage. Slide, click, thud. I stood there in the hallway, the smell of bleach lingering in my nostrils. I told myself he was just a cranky old man. Every building has one. I was the interloper, the young guy disrupting the ecosystem. I resolved to be quieter. The real terror began 2 weeks later. It started with the scratching. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, drifting in that hypnagogic state between wakefulness and sleep. My bed was positioned against the wall I shared with 4B. The scratching started low, near the floorboards. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was rhythmic, slow, deliberate. It didn't sound like a mouse. A mouse scurries. This sounded like a fingernail being dragged down the drywall with enough pressure to leave a mark. It would start at the top of the wall, near the ceiling, and slowly descend to the floor over the course of 10 seconds. Then silence. Then it would start at the top again. I sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. The room was bathed in warm yellow light, but the wall looked ominous. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. Silence. Then, directly on the other side of where my ear was pressed, tap. One single hard tap. I recoiled, heart hammering. It was a response. He knew I was listening. I grabbed a broom handle, a classic cartoonish reaction, and banged on the wall. "Knock it off!" I shouted. The response was immediate. A low, guttural laugh. It wasn't loud, but the walls were so thin it sounded like he was under my bed. Heh, heh, heh. I slept on the couch that night. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in my apartment shifted. It felt violated. I started noticing small things out of place. I'm a creature of habit. I leave my keys in a bowl by the door, my toothbrush in the left hole of the holder, my laptop closed on the coffee table. One Tuesday, I came home from a rare office visit to find my laptop open. Not on, just open. The screen was black, the battery dead. I assumed I'd forgotten to close it, but then I went to the bathroom. My toothbrush was wet, sopping wet. I hadn't been home since 7 a.m. A cold dread washed over me. I checked the windows, locked. The front door, deadbolted. There was no sign of forced entry. I called the landlord. "Henderson?" I demanded. "Been in my apartment?" "I ain't got time for that," he grunted over the phone. "Unless there's a leak, I don't go in." "Someone was in here." "You changed the locks?" "No." "Well, maybe you gave a key to a girlfriend." "Look, kid, unless something is broken, don't bother me." I bought a hidden camera that night, a small cube disguised as a USB charger. I plugged it in, facing the front door and the hallway leading to the bathroom. I felt paranoid, borderline crazy. I was the heavy walker next door, losing his mind. The footage from the first night revealed nothing. No one entered, no one left. But the audio picked up something I hadn't heard with my own ears. I watched the playback at 2x speed, looking for movement. Nothing. But when I listened to the audio track at 3:17 a.m. while I was asleep in the next room, I heard it. From the wall shared with 4B, a voice was speaking. It wasn't whispering to itself, it was projecting.
Mark is sleeping. Mark is dreaming. Mark misses Sarah. Mark is lonely. Then a pause, and then, in a voice that chilled my blood because it was a perfect mimicry of my own voice, "I promise I'll do better, Sarah. Please don't go." It was a line I had said to my ex-girlfriend 6 months ago in a house 20 miles away. How did he know that? How could he possibly know that? I stopped sleeping. I started drinking coffee by the pot. I sat in my living room staring at the shared wall, waiting. I researched Calloway. There was nothing. No social media, no phone records online, just a name in a directory from 1982. The escalation hit its peak on a rainy Tuesday. I was working, headphones on, trying to drown out the anxiety. I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed something odd about the medicine cabinet. It was an old metal recessed unit, painted over a dozen times. The paint along the right edge, the edge closest to 4B, was cracked, freshly cracked. I touched it, and the cabinet shifted. It wasn't screwed in tight. The screws on the right side had been removed, leaving only the ones on the left acting as a hinge. Pulse pounding in my ears, I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen. I removed the remaining screws. I pulled the cabinet out of the wall. Behind it, there should have been a stud bay, insulation, maybe the back of the drywall for the next unit. Instead, there was a hole, a meticulously cut rectangular hole through the lath and plaster leading directly into the wall cavity. And beyond that, light, dim, flickering blue light. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the void. The wall between our apartments had been hollowed out. The studs had been sawed away to create a crawl space, a tunnel running the length of the bathroom. I leaned in, squinting. The smell hit me again, rotting fruit and bleach, overpowered by the copper tang of old blood. I shone the light to the right. Nothing. I shone it to the left, toward his bathroom. Through a matching hole in the back of his medicine cabinet, I could see into his bathroom. But it wasn't a bathroom. It was a dark room. Photos were hanging from lines strung across the tub, hundreds of them. I zoomed the beam of my flashlight. My breath hitched. The photos were of me sleeping, me eating cereal, me watching TV, me in the shower. But they weren't taken from outside. The angles were impossible. They were taken from inside my apartment. Then there was the shrine. On the toilet tank in his bathroom sat a mannequin head. It was wearing a wig that matched my hair color. It had photos of my eyes taped over its eyes, and around its neck was my missing blue tie. Suddenly, the light in his bathroom went out. Total darkness through the hole. Then a sound, the slide of the shower curtain. "I see you, Mark," the voice whispered. It wasn't coming from the hole. It was coming from right behind me. I spun around. The bathroom door, which I had left open, was now closed. I hadn't heard it close. I lunged for the knob, locked from the outside. Panic, raw and primal, took over. I slammed my shoulder against the door. It held. The wood was old, but the lock was new. Wait, when had the lock been changed? "Open the door!" I screamed. "No," the voice said from the hallway of my own apartment. "We are roommates now." I heard the heavy footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. My own boots. He was wearing my boots. I backed up against the sink, grabbing the heavy ceramic lid of the toilet tank. I watched the doorknob jiggle. Then silence. I looked back at the hole in the wall where the medicine cabinet used to be. A hand, pale, skeletal, with long yellow nails, reached through from his side. It was holding a camera. Click. The flash blinded me. "Smile," the voice rasped from the hallway. I didn't wait. I kicked the door with everything I had. Once, twice. On the third kick, the frame splintered. I tumbled into the hallway. The apartment was empty. The front door was open wide. I ran. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away in a bodega shaking so hard I couldn't dial 911. When the police arrived,
They swept Unit 4B. It was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no clothes, just dust and a single chair facing the wall shared with my bedroom. But the bathroom confirmed everything. The cutout behind the cabinet, the tunnel, and the photos. They found thousands of Polaroids, but they weren't just of me. They were of the previous tenant and the one before that. They never found Calloway. The landlord, Henderson, claimed he didn't have a record of a Calloway ever living there, despite what he told me. He claimed the unit had been vacant for repairs for years. He said I must have been hallucinating from a gas leak. But I know the truth, because when I went back to pack my things, accompanied by a police officer, I found one last Polaroid tucked under my pillow. It was a photo of me taken from the ceiling angle, looking down at my sleeping form. The timestamp on the photo was from that morning, and written in Sharpie across my chest were the words, "See you in the next one."
I've always been a light sleeper. A dripping faucet or a distant car alarm is usually enough to pull me out of a deep REM cycle. So when I moved into the duplex at 402 Ridley Avenue, I made sure to ask the landlord about the noise insulation. He assured me the walls were brick-lined, solid and soundproof. He lied. Or maybe he just didn't know what the previous tenant had done to the place. The first week was blissful. I was 24, fresh out of college, and starting a junior graphic design job in the city. The rent was cheap, surprisingly so for the square footage. My neighbor was an elderly man named Mr. Calloway. I met him on move-in day. He was standing on his porch, staring at a dead potted plant with an intensity that was unsettling. He didn't wave when I pulled up. He just turned his head slowly, his neck craning like a tortoise, and watched me haul boxes. When I said hello, he muttered something about keeping the noise down and retreated inside, slamming his heavy oak door. That should have been the first red flag, but I chalked it up to him being a grump. I unpacked, set up my workspace in the living room, and put my bed against the shared wall, the long wall that ran the length of the house, separating my sanctuary from Mr. Calloway's domain. It started on the third night. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, the blue light illuminating the ceiling. It was around 2 a.m. The house was dead silent. Then, right behind my head, I heard it. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was rhythmic, soft, like a fingernail being dragged slowly across the plaster on the other side. I froze, holding my breath. I waited. Scritch, scritch. I sat up, turning on the lamp. The sound stopped instantly. Mice, I whispered to myself, trying to regulate my heartbeat. It's just mice in the wall cavity. But mice don't stop when you turn on a light. Mice scurry. This sound had paused, as if reacting to my movement. I knocked on the wall with my knuckle. 3 sharp raps. From the other side, barely audible, came 3 sharp raps back. A cold bucket of ice water seemed to pour down my spine. I stared at the blank white paint. "Hello?" I asked, feeling foolish. Silence. I convinced myself I had imagined the response. It was late, I was tired. Echoes were weird in old houses. I put in earplugs and went to sleep, though my dreams were filled with the sound of dry skin rubbing against drywall. Things escalated a week later. I came home from work to find my apartment smelling off. It wasn't a bad smell exactly. It smelled like Old Spice and stale tobacco. I didn't smoke and I didn't wear cologne. I checked the windows, all locked. I checked the back door, deadbolted. Paranoia, I told myself. Just the vents sharing air. But that night, the scratching returned, and this time it was accompanied by a low, melodic humming. It was coming from exactly the same spot as before, directly behind my bedhead. It sounded like a lullaby, distorted by the drywall. I pulled my bed away from the wall, dragging the frame across the hardwood floor. I knelt down, inspecting the plaster. That's when I saw it. A tiny hole, no bigger than the tip of a pencil lead. It was so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. But beneath the hole, on the baseboard, was a fine dusting of white powder. Someone had drilled through from the other side. My stomach churned. I grabbed a piece of tape and covered the hole. Then I pushed the bed back, but I slept on the couch that night. The next morning, I confronted Mr. Calloway.
I pounded on his door. It took him 5 minutes to answer. When he did, he opened it a crack, the chain still on. The smell of stale tobacco wafted out, thick and choking. "What?" he rasped. His eyes were watery, pale blue and red-shot. "Mr. Calloway, I think you might be accidentally drilling into my wall," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a hole in my bedroom." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Fixing a shelf," he grunted. He shut the door in my face. "Fixing a shelf," I repeated. It seemed plausible. Old men were always tinkering. Maybe he was just clumsy. I went back to my apartment feeling slightly better, but still uneasy. I decided to inspect the rest of the shared wall. I moved the dresser in the living room. Nothing. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. Then I went into the walk-in closet in the hallway. It shared a wall with his unit as well. I pushed aside my winter coats and shone my flashlight on the back wall. My heart stopped. There wasn't just one hole. There were dozens. They were clustered in a pattern at eye level, and some of them had been widened. I leaned in closer, terrified of what I might see, but compelled by a primal need to know. I put my eye to the largest hole, about the size of a dime. Light. I could see light on the other side, and movement. I was looking into a room. It looked like a living room, but it was stripped bare. No furniture, just piles of insulation and drywall stacked in the corners. And in the center of the room, sitting on a wooden stool, facing the wall, facing me, was Mr. Calloway. He wasn't fixing a shelf. He was sitting there, motionless, with a pair of heavy-duty headphones on, and he was holding a stethoscope against the wall. He was listening. I stumbled back, tripping over a pair of shoes. I made a loud thud. On the other side of the wall, Calloway's head snapped up. He looked directly at the cluster of holes, directly at me. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predator's grin, revealing yellowed, rotting teeth. He stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with the wall, and began walking toward the holes. I scrambled out of the closet, slamming the door shut. Panic took over. I grabbed my keys and my phone. I needed to get out. I needed the police. As I fumbled with the lock on my front door, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Click. The sound of a key turning. My front door lock turned. From the outside. I stared at the knob as it began to rotate. I realized then, the duplex was owned by a private landlord. Calloway had lived here for 20 years. He probably had copies of every key.
I threw my body weight against the door just as it opened. Calloway was there, stronger than he looked, shoving his way in. He held a power drill in one hand and a roll of duct tape in the other. "You're loud," he whispered, his breath smelling of decay. "Too loud." I screamed and kicked him in the knee. His leg buckled with a sickening crunch. He howled, dropping the drill. The spinning bit tore into the carpet. I didn't wait. I shoved past him, sprinting out onto the porch and down the driveway. I didn't stop running until I reached the gas station 3 blocks away. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911, sobbing hysterically. When the police arrived, Calloway was gone. His side of the duplex was empty, but what they found inside his apartment haunts me to this day. There was no furniture except for that stool, but the walls were a honeycomb. He had installed a system of pipes and funnels against the shared wall to amplify sound. He had recordings, hundreds of cassette tapes labeled with dates and times. Some were labeled sleeping, some were labeled shower, some were labeled with names of tenants I had never met. And behind a false panel in his closet, they found a crawl space, a narrow tunnel he had dug out between the walls. It ran the entire length of the house. The police found a sleeping bag in that crawl space. It was positioned directly behind where my headbed had been. He hadn't just been drilling holes. He had been sleeping next to me, separated only by a layer of drywall and his own twisted obsession. They never caught Mr. Calloway. The landlord claimed he had no family, no next of kin. He just vanished into the night. I moved out the next day. I live in a top-floor apartment now, in a high-rise made of concrete and steel. I don't have shared walls anymore, but every night before I go to sleep, I take a glass
press it against the concrete, and I listen, just to make sure no one is listening back.
You know that saying, good fences make good neighbors? It's a lie. Fences don't do anything when the horror shares a wall with you. When the only thing separating your sleeping body from a monster is 4 inches of drywall and some insulation. I moved into the duplex on 4th Street in late October. It was a steal. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, and rent that was about $300 under market value. The landlord, a nervous guy named Peterson, told me the previous tenant left in a hurry. Family emergency, he said, his eyes darting around the empty living room like he was expecting something to jump out of the corners. I didn't care. I was 24, broke, and desperate. The other half of the duplex was occupied by Arthur Gantry. That's what the mailbox said, Gantry. Sounds almost noble, doesn't it? He was about 70, skin like parchment paper that had been crumpled up and smoothed out too many times. He always wore these thick wool cardigans, even when the heating was blasting. When I introduced myself, he just stared at my neck. Not my eyes, my neck. He smiled, and his teeth were gray. Fresh blood, he whispered. Then he laughed like it was a joke. I laughed too. I wish I hadn't. The first month was quiet, too quiet. I never heard him walk. I never heard a TV, just silence. Until the smell started. It began as a faint, earthy scent, like wet soil. Then it soured. By December, my bedroom smelled like a butcher shop that had lost power for a week. I bought candles, I bought industrial air fresheners. Nothing worked. It was heavy. It felt greasy in the air, coating the back of my throat. Then came the sounds. It was 3:03 a.m. I know the time because I was staring at the clock, trying not to vomit from the stench. Scritch, scritch, thump, right behind my head. It sounded like something trying to dig its way out of the wall, not in. I banged on the wall. "Hey, keep it down," I yelled. The scratching stopped immediately. Then a voice, muffled, distorted by the insulation, but audible. A voice that sounded wet. "Help me." I froze. My blood turned to ice. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. Then from Gantry's side, music, opera. Verdi, I think, blasting at maximum volume. It shook the floorboards. It drowned out everything. I called the cops. They came, knocked on his door. He answered in his pajamas, looking confused and frail. He told them he was hard of hearing and just wanted to listen to his records. The cops looked at me like I was the asshole bullying a senior citizen. They left. As soon as the cruiser pulled away, the music stopped and the scratching started again. This went on for 6 months. I started losing my hair from the stress. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I slept on the couch with a knife under my... I started tracking Gantry. He never took out trash. Never. In 6 months, I never saw him bring a single bag to the curb, but he brought things in. Large, heavy suitcases, always at night, always struggling with the weight. One Tuesday, I stayed home sick. I saw Gantry leave in his old Buick. I knew I had maybe an hour. I didn't go into his house. I wasn't that stupid. I went to the shared wall in my bedroom. There was a soft spot in the plaster, right where the smell was strongest. I took a hammer. I didn't think. I just swung. The drywall crumbled like chalk. It was wet, soaked through. I pulled away a chunk of insulation. It was black with mold, or so I thought. I shined my flashlight into the cavity between the studs. It wasn't empty. It was packed, stuffed, not with insulation, with clothes, old, dirt-stained clothes, and wrapped inside them, organic matter. I saw a hand, not a skeleton, a hand, gray, desiccated, preserved like jerky, and eyes. Glass jars stacked between the studs, filled with cloudy liquid, looking back at me. Then I heard the front door open. Not my door, his. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat seized. I heard his footsteps, not the shuffling of an old man anymore. Heavy, fast bootfalls. He knew. He could probably smell the fresh air hitting his trophy case. I ran. I didn't grab my wallet, I didn't grab my shoes. I ran out the back door, hopped the fence, and sprinted until my lungs burned. I called the police from a gas station 3 miles away. They found 12 people in the walls of that duplex. 12, he had been thinning them out, preserving them, using them as insulation. The police said the "help me" I heard wasn't a ghost. It was faulty plumbing vibrating the pipes, sounding like a human voice. But I know what I heard. Gantry? He was gone when they got there. The Buick was found abandoned near the state line. They never caught him. Sometimes, when I'm in my new apartment and the silence gets too heavy, I check the walls. I tap on them, and I pray to God I don't hear a tap back. People pay millions for a view. We did. My wife, Sarah, and I poured our life savings into a modern architectural marvel in the middle of nowhere. Glass walls, that was the selling point. Bring the outside in, the brochure said. The problem is, when you bring the outside in, you can't keep the terror out. At night, a glass house is just a lit stage, and the darkness is the audience. The property next to ours was technically a farm, but nothing grew there except weeds and rust. The farmhouse was a mile away, barely visible, but the owner, he was always close. We first noticed him 3 days after moving in. We were having coffee on the deck. Sarah pointed to the tree line about 400 yards out. "Is that a statue?" she asked. I grabbed the binoculars. It was a man, standing rigid, arms at his sides, wearing a brown suit that looked 3 sizes too big. He wasn't looking at the scenery. He was looking directly at us. I waved. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He stood there for 6 hours. We laughed it off at first, the quirky local, but every morning he was closer, 10 yards, 20 yards. By the second week, he was standing at the edge of our lawn, right where the manicured grass met his wild weeds. He would arrive at dawn and stand until dusk. I went out to confront him. I marched right up to the property line. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound tough. He smelled like copper and ammonia. His skin was waxy, poreless almost. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, at the house, at Sarah, who was watching from the kitchen. "The glass is thin." His voice sounded like grinding stones. "Very thin. Stay off my property," I warned. He smiled. "It was too wide. I am on my land. You are the one in the fishbowl." That night, we put up curtains, sheets, blankets, anything to cover the glass. We felt exposed. The police came out, shrugged, and said, "He's not trespassing. Being creepy isn't a crime." Things escalated. We started finding things on the porch. Dead birds arranged in a circle, a doll that looked like Sarah, its eyes burned out with cigarettes. Then the photos. I found a Polaroid taped to the windshield of my car. It was a photo of me sleeping, taken from inside the bedroom. We packed immediately. We were leaving that night, but a storm rolled in, a massive localized cell that knocked out the grid. The house went pitch black. The electronic gates jammed shut. We were trapped. We sat in the living room with a flashlight, clutching each other. The rain hammered against the glass walls. Then lightning flashed. He was there, pressed against the glass. His face flattened against the pane, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. I screamed. Sarah screamed. The lightning faded, plunging us back into darkness. When the next bolt hit, he was gone. "Check the doors," I yelled. I ran to the back slider, locked. I ran to the front, locked. Then I heard it, a soft, wet footstep on the hardwood floor behind me. Inside. He was inside. I shined the light into the kitchen. He was standing by the island. He wasn't wearing the brown suit anymore. He was naked, covered in mud, holding a pair of shears. "The glass broke," he whispered. We ran upstairs to the master bath, the only room with a lock and no windows. We barricaded the door. We heard him destroying the house, smashing the furniture, tearing the paintings. He threw himself against the bathroom door, howling like an animal. "Let me see! Let me see!" We were in there for 7 hours. When the sun came up, the battering stopped. The police arrived at 8 a.m. The house was destroyed. But the scariest part? The police found a sleeping bag in the crawl space under the house, and food wrappers and jars of urine. He hadn't just broken in that night. He'd been living under our floorboards since the day we moved in. The man in the field, that was just to distract us while he burrowed up from below.
We never went back. The bank foreclosed. If you see a listing for a glass house in the valley, cheap, keep scrolling.
Suburbs are designed to feel safe. The lawns are flat, the streets are wide, the lights are bright. But you never look down. You never think about what's happening 10 feet below your slippers. I lived on Elm Ridge for 5 years. My neighbor, Elias, was an engineer or a miner. No one really knew. He was a frantic little man, always covered in gray dust, eyes bloodshot behind thick goggles. He spent every waking moment in his basement. The noise began in April. A drill, zzz, zzz, constant, rhythmic. It wasn't a hand drill. It sounded industrial, like he was boring through bedrock. I complained to the HOA. They sent a letter. Elias ignored it. The vibration got so bad that pictures fell off my walls. My coffee would ripple in the mug like that scene in Jurassic Park. One evening, my dog, Buster, started digging in the backyard. Frantic digging, whimpering. I went out to stop him, and I saw it. The ground was sagging. A depression in the lawn, perfectly circular, right near Elias's yard. I stepped closer, and the ground gave way. I didn't just fall a few feet. I slid. It was a chute. Mud and grass filled my mouth. I tumbled down into the dark, landing hard on packed earth. I broke my wrist instantly. The pain was blinding. I fumbled for my phone, flashlight on. I wasn't in a hole. I was in a hallway, a reinforced tunnel, shored up with stolen street signs and 2x4s. It smelled of ozone and rot. "Hello?" I screamed. My voice echoed endlessly. I started walking. I had to find a way out. The tunnel split. Left went toward Elias's house. Right went under my house. I went right. I felt sick. He had been digging under me while I slept. The tunnel widened into a room directly beneath my living room. I looked up and saw the underside of my own floorboards. I could see the piping of my toilet. And there, in the center of this dirt room, was a chair. A single chair positioned to look up at the gaps in my floor, and a notepad. I read the notepad. Timestamps. Subject sleeping, 11 p.m. Subject arguing on the phone, 9:30 a.m. Subject dropped keys. He wasn't renovating, he was monitoring. But it got worse. I followed the tunnel further. It didn't stop at my house. It went to the Millers, to the Johnsons, a web, a spider web of tunnels connecting the whole neighborhood. Then I heard the machine, the drilling. It was getting louder, and I heard chanting. I turned a corner and saw light, a massive cavern excavated by hand. Elias was there. He wasn't alone. There were things. Mannequins? No, people, covered in plaster, standing like statues in the walls. Elias saw me. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed. "You're early," he said. He raised a nail gun. I ran. I scrambled back through the dark, adrenaline numbing my broken wrist. I heard the thwip-thwip of nails hitting the timber supports around me. I found the chute. I fell down. I couldn't climb it. It was too steep. I had to go to his house. I ran toward his basement entrance. I burst up through a trap door hidden under a rug in his den. I smashed through his back door and collapsed on the lawn, screaming for help. The police SWAT team had to map the tunnels with robots. They stretched for 3 miles. They found cameras wired into people's vents. They found a nursery under the Johnsons' house. But the Johnsons didn't have a baby. Elias collapsed the main tunnel on himself before they could take him. They never dug him out. They just filled the holes with concrete. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I swear I can still feel the vibration. The drill, deeper this time. He's not dead. He's just going deeper.